Come back again for another hard surface practice video using pretty much the exact same techniques as before, and let's see if we can make something cool looking. So I can use a 64 vert cylinder. Just going to bring that forward, give it the material and scale it up, just excluding the Z axis. And moving it forward slightly. Again, there's no real plan of what I'm making here. It's just sort of, it's almost freeform modelling in a way. But doing little experiments like this really also help with if you've got any kind of artistic block. Like sometimes you open up Blender, you look at the default cube, you reevaluate your life choices, and you just close Blender again and decide not today. But doing little experiments like this, they're quick, they're fun, they look pretty cool, and you end up with some abstract shape that you go, oh, that looks like a grenade launcher, I'll use that in a project. You know, or it might just look like a toaster, you don't know. But they're just fun little things to play around with. I find it a lot easier to play around with shapes and form and things in 3D than I do with drawing. As much as I've always loved drawing, I'm much better at sort of grey boxing in 3D than I am in 2D. Just going to move the back of those inside and union them together. I will have a video or possibly series coming out soon on design principles that I've sort of pieced together from various influences, including just my own knowledge. Part of that will be talking about form and just different considerations to make when you're making your objects. Just going to make this part slope down. If I just move that forward, it will increase the slope there. I'll just move the whole thing down so it intersects with that piece underneath there. This is a bit of a messy way of doing it, but I'm just going to increase the merge by distance just to clean up all those verts that have gone a bit AWOL there. The good thing with modelling like this is it's quite quick and intuitive, apart from having to reassign materials and hit auto smooth on everything. But equally, you could, if you wanted to set up a similar sort of thing to what I've got here, is there's nothing stopping you from having a cube and a cylinder already set up with those materials and with auto smooth on in the background, and you just duplicate them and snap them into place. Would make life a lot easier and faster. I know I don't do that here, but that's because I don't know, I like to do things the long way for some reason. So here, just increasing the solidify just gives it a bit more of a gap between those parts. And then if you select and separate them, you can assign the other colour. Doesn't have to be yellow. I've just gone with grey and yellow because I really liked the way it looked on Purbo Alam, who I mentioned in the previous video, on his hard surface practices. He managed to get some really good looking shapes. They're all basically just boxes and cylinders cut into each other in different ways, but it gives you a chance to sort of refine how you're designing things. And if you want to, as you add smaller and smaller details, you can assign the same material but with the same coloured material but with a smaller bevel on the bevel shader. I was going to do an experiment of working at larger scales so that the bevel shader can be set to higher amounts. I haven't looked into whether that makes any difference or not yet. I find that using it at really small values, like 0.0001, for example, when you're trying to do normal maps and things like that from it, sometimes you can run into problems. I'm not sure yet if I was going to do an experiment to see if, say, you model the thing at 50 times the size you was going to do. You can use a bigger bevel shader and then just scale the model down once you've got your normal map baked. I do think the bevel shader is excellent for normal map details, especially panel lines and the edge highlights, obviously. The only real drawback is having to sort of rebake if you're going to then use a normal map in your texturing, which you don't have to, and that's only if you're procedurally texturing. If you're just going to use photographic texturing, you can just sort of combine them in Photoshop if you want to. There's a guy online's got a great video on how to do that the proper way, not just sort of fading them over the top. He gets into all how to adjust the red, blue and green channels in Photoshop so that the normal maps sort of overlay properly. Small note with the array modifier, obviously if you rotate the object first, it will use its local axes, so sometimes you have to apply the rotation if you want it to act as expected. And that's a very basic tip, but it's just something that can go wrong while you're doing all this. There's always millions of little things that could potentially go wrong when you're modelling, and it's just knowing how to fix them that speeds up your workflow and your progress. I've got the Nail Tools Edge Curve Plus add-on, which is free. You can get that online. It's very good for adding extra loops around the cylinder. It kind of subdivides it, but without messing up the ends. Just adds more resolution to cylinders. It's very easy to add and remove. You can check a deselect, an offset if you need to remove loops from a cylinder, and use the Edge Curve Plus if you want to add them back in. Again, these are all very abstract shapes, just sort of coming together. Just going to slice off the side of this cylinder that I've just put in. They're not really supposed to look like anything other than some sort of mechanical part that you might see maybe as a background object in some factory, I don't know. Just mirror that across. And I might just drag that over to extend it. Add another cylinder through the middle to cut away. Just putting wireframe on every so often just so I can snap to particular verts and make sure I get the right one. Just gonna difference that out. And then union that to the main object. Just remember to apply the scale before beveling, and clamp overlap and merge the verts. That looks quite cool as a little recess where you might have a screw or bolt or something holding things together. I'm going to cut that all the way through there. That looks pretty cool. solidify and increase the thickness a bit. Just notice the curve on the bottom of that part looks really low poly, but not to worry, it's just for practice. I'm just going to give that the yellow material. And if you watch this and the previous one, you've probably got used to the procedure by now. It's add a cube or cylinder or ball, whatever you want to add, to use as a cutter, and then just sort of boolean them together in interesting ways to see what designs you can come up with. I've run these videos at double speed. That's purely because it just looks very slow at normal speed. But even then, they've gone from like half an hour down to sort of 12 minutes. I don't want them to be too long or you'll get bored. Not massively keen on what I did with this bit. Just think it looks a bit odd. Thank you for watching and take care.